All right, welcome to the first video lecture for Of Mice and Men, starting off with chapters 1 and 2. So, let's see how this goes, guys. Let's start off first. The first thing you guys need to do is go ahead and read chapter 1. All right, that's pages 1 through 16 there. As you read, you're going to want to make sure to pay attention to all the California scenery that is described in deep detail. It's also very important to note this scenery because it becomes, as I mentioned before in the introduction lecture last week, it's part of the book in that it's almost another character, but it also serves as a purpose to foreshadow and as a very important piece of setting. So in this first chapter, we're going to meet George and Lenny. You remember George Milton and then Lenny Small, ironically called that because he's actually the bigger of the two. He's much taller. And as you read, really pay attention to who these men are and the nature of their relationship, like who has the power and how they work together and whatnot. And also, as you read, you guys are going to want to pay attention to the fact that Steinbeck writes in the common vernacular, that's a big word there, of the time period. Remember, he was writing in 1937, which means that people didn't speak then how they speak now. Their accent, their slang would have been much different. The slang words especially would have been a lot different. In one case in chapter 2, one of the characters says something about not having the poop enough to do something, and that doesn't mean like poo as we think of today. It means like the energy to do something. As you also read, you might want to read aloud. It'll help you understand the accent a bit. For example, Steinbeck often writes J-U-S and then an apostrophe. Okay? What he really means is just. I just want to do something. And you'll notice we often tend to drop the last letter whenever we speak. Instead of saying going to, we say gonna or gonna. So just note that if you read something aloud, it'll really help you a lot more in understanding what the characters are trying to say. Okay, now speaking of, here's some vocab for you to be defined, a few words there. Go ahead and pause the video recording at this point if you want to kind of get to know the words. A really important one to notice right away is number 5, bindle. George refers to his bindle quite a bit. It's the sack in which hobos or bindle stiffs would use to carry their belongings around as they walked around. All right, so after you've looked at the vocab and after you've read chapter 1, go ahead and follow along the next couple of slides. But until that point, you can pause right here. All right, chapter 1. So chapter 1, we meet George and Lenny. It starts off first with some description of the Salinas River in Central California there. At the end of this lecture, there will be some handouts, some echo activities that you have to respond to. There are reading questions, and I should have up for you actually some links to maps of this area so you can actually take a look at it and see exactly what the Salinas River looks like and where it's located in California. But in any case, moving on. So George in this part of the book uses this great quote up here on page 14. With us, it ain't like that. We got a future. We got somebody to talk to that gives a damn about us. And that really describes the nature of their relationship and how it's that forms the heart of the novel too. The friendship between these two men is really what this book is about, and about how special and truly unique it was. Steinbeck really idealizes male friendships, suggesting that male friendships really are the most dignified and satisfying way to overcome the loneliness that is so present for so many people in the world. People are lonely. They have no one who can talk to them, who, as he says there, gives a damn about who they are. And so it's really important to note that George and Lenny, they have that. And even though they exist on the margins of society, which means they don't fit into the majority of where the power is in society, they don't have a home that they live in and go home to every day. They don't have a stable job in a factory or an office building. They're migrant ranch workers. They wander around. But despite that, George and Lenny are extremely lucky. to have each other. And Steinbeck goes on to even say how special this bond really is, because it's so rare. It's so rare to have a friend. And it is so rare also because the majority of the world does not really understand or appreciate it. They don't get how deep of a friendship this is. And so all the other characters we meet in the book that we're gonna meet in the next chapters, only one other character really understands it, and it's not till the end of the book do we really see that that person gets it, but everyone else doesn't understand, and they're actually kind of distrusting of it. When the ranch foreman meets them, he doesn't believe that George would want to speak for Lenny and want to help him out. He thinks he's trying to steal his money. It speaks to the distrust and the loneliness that most people live their life with. And moving on here, as I said before, that theme of loneliness. Steinbeck really believes, and he talks about through the book and the occurrences of what happens in the book, how loneliness is responsible for the suffering that mankind goes through, man and women, but especially men in this book. And human beings, he suggests, are really at their best when they have someone else in their life for guidance and protection. So George and Lenny are the most noble characters in this book because they have each other, because they are able to rely on each other. And they are at their best despite being poor and homeless and having to move from place to place and all their other troubles. They're the best because they are looking out for each other, and that friendship is so very, very important. And moving on. One of the last things to kind of note is about the landscape. The detailed description is so important to Steinbeck because, as I mentioned, he's very much involved in the environment, as in California especially, and he wants his readers to see the beauty of the land and to see the landscape as he saw it. But also, as I previously mentioned, this is a very important place, and this is a very, very important location, and will be so in the end of the book. Okay, moving on to chapter 2. So that is pages 17 through 37 there. Make sure you go ahead and read that first, and after you've read it, go ahead and come back to the lecture here, but make sure you're paying attention to the description of the bunkhouse and then the new characters we meet. Okay. Alright, so in chapter 2 we meet Candy, Slim, Carlson, Curly, Curly's wife. We also meet the ranch foreman, and by mentioning we meet Crooks. Crooks is he is the only African American in the entire book, and is called by several in this modern age racist terms, stable buck and the N-word. Buck was a racist term for a black man at the time, and since he is the stable man, he's the one who runs the stables and takes care of the horses and all the blacksmithing on the ranch, he's called the stable buck. That's often the term used to describe crooks. Okay. So right away, section 2, immediately we see how painfully cruel the world can be. So right away, George, his fear of the lice and the roaches that infest his bunk, that really helps to describe the imagery of how much this life is a struggle, having to migrate, and they can only have what they could fit to that little apple crate that's on the side of their bunk there. And when we meet Curly right away, gosh, Curly is the embodiment of authority on the ranch and of violence, which we'll get to in a second. Let me make sure I also talk about Candy and Carlson here. Candy is the oldest man on the ranch, and he has an old dog. And Carlson here is like, hey, your old dog needs to be killed. She's too old to live. Why don't you get yourself a new puppy there? Which really signals to us as the reader how the weak and the debilitated, and debilitated means someone who doesn't have abilities anymore, like physical or mental or whatever, they're unworthy of protection or preservation, which is that's how it was on the ranch. That was the way society was. The people, if you didn't have power, if you couldn't do things, if you weren't capable in some way, if you needed to be looked after and you were weak or sick or something, you weren't considered powerful, or able, you shouldn't be kept around. And so Candy lived in constant fear that he'd be asked to leave the ranch, that he would have nowhere else to go though. But since he couldn't do his job anymore, he constantly thought that he would quite possibly be kicked off, which was another symbol for how if you don't have power, you don't have any stability or safety in your life. Okay, so Curly, one of the most interesting characters, he is at the most obviously he is what's called a foil. Okay, his purpose is quite simply to be violent and belligerent, and he represents how social power, people who have a lot of power, they manifest themselves in society, usually in a violent or manipulative or vicious manner. And so Curly is very loud and in your face about I have power and you gotta listen to me. And Slim, who is another man who has power on the ranch, and not because he's the foreman's son the way Curly is the foreman's son. Slim has power because he is really good at what he does, and he's just has this kind of quiet self-assuredness that everyone is drawn to. He doesn't speak a whole lot. He's very laconic, good vocab word, but he also, whatever he says, is people listen to. They hold true to it. And so Curly, he's not very self-assured. He has all these self-doubts, and they are represented a lot through his relationship with his wife. And you'll note that in the book, Curly's wife is only called Curly's wife. She does not ever, is never given a name. And Steinbeck makes a lot of commentary in the fact he doesn't name her. And the relationship of Curly's wife to every other male on the farm is one that Steinbeck is making a big commentary on. And you remember me saying earlier on that the importance of male friendship is huge in this book. Steinbeck believed that male friendship was the one way to really be noble and to find comfort and safety in your life and to be happy. He believed women were pretty much either a caretaker of men or they were just sex objects. They were never really, they're not really supposed to have a place in the vision of paradise that Lenny and George are creating for themselves when they have that dream of the farm. And Steinbeck is really making a commentary on how a woman's only purpose, and before I tell you, can you make a little guess at what the one purpose women have in the world? I want to see if you can maybe figure it out. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the one purpose women really serve is to distract men from their friendships and to destroy them, to be seductresses that tempt men away from what is noble and good in their life. And that is the only purpose that Curly's wife really serves in the book. And since she is the only main female character, Steinbeck is really making a commentary about women at this in his life. And you will recall how women and Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts, one of his influences, remember they had a little falling out over a wife. So it's no wonder that Steinbeck maybe believes that his male friendship was ruined because of a woman. All right, so that is a nice overview of some of the bigger themes in chapters 1 and 2. As you read, really pay attention to the characters, their actions, their words. If you are playing one of the characters as a witness, you want to really make sure to annotate for wherever your character comes up. And if you're looking to defend or prosecute George or Lenny, same thing. Really pay attention to George and Lenny in here in the nature of how they do things, what they say, and what evidence you can find here. And please don't forget to do the echo activity for chapters 1 and 2. There are a bunch of discussion questions that you need to answer. Please pay attention to the number of words expected for each answer. And that is the end of chapter 1 and 2 lecture.